Welcome to the Angus Conversation. I'm your host, Miranda Reiman, with my co-host, Mark McCully, CEO of the American Angus Association. And Mark, we are back for season 7 of the podcast.
That's amazing to me that we've been doing this for 7 seasons. It's flying by. It feels like we just started.
It really does. And I guess that's probably because of the quality of the guests that we continue to get time after time. So it's always fun to take people's suggestions, add them to our list, and we've got lots of material to cover, lots of great Angus breeders across the United States.
Absolutely. We do love that feedback. And I run into people and like, hey, I love this one. And what about, so I'd love to hear a similar story of, so-and-so. And, so maybe somebody that, like I would say we had today in Mr. Paul Hill, that most people in the Angus world know Paul. Maybe not everyone's had the chance to just sit down and visit with him for an hour like we got to today.
It was really fun. We got to hear about a lot of the different kind of pedigrees or storied cow families, but we also got to hear about experiences of, going on long runs of shows together and all the way over to, I would say, experiences that would shape the history of the United States. And that would be when he talked briefly about his time serving in Vietnam.
Yeah, and it was such an honor to showcase Paul as well as several other veterans that we have in our Angus family and in the Salute to Service edition of the Angus Journal there. And I hope folks really, I think, just some fantastic stories and some wonderful people, and those are great to go back. If you miss those, I would highly encourage you to go back and check them all out. And Paul's story was one of those.
Absolutely. You can either pick up your July edition of the Angus Journal or go ahead and go online to the angusjournal.net and you can find all of those stories. As we all know that out in cattle country, freedom ranks high as a value we all share. And so it's fun to read those stories of those who protected our freedom. So I guess, Mark, without a lot of further ado, I think we just jump into this one because Paul just starts right off telling his story and it's going to be fun to listen to. Today on the podcast, we have Paul Hill with Champion Hill at Bidwell, Ohio, actually located in Indiana, I think, today, if that's right, Paul.
That's it.
Yeah, and an Angus Heritage Foundation inductee, you and your wife, Lynn, in 2009, Longtime Angus Foundation supporter, and a former president of the American Angus Association Board of Directors, so a lot of credentials on there.
And Paul, I think of you most famously as Champion Hill, but I know we'll hear in your story you've got such a rich Angus background of different operations that you were a part of and came up through. So we just appreciate you joining us here today.
Yeah, it's kind of been really always think of myself as a person that's been lucky all his life. Opportunities coming before me, and I had the guts to take them. And a lot of people in life, think they might be the worst thing they ever did. A lot of times in my life, some of the things I thought was pretty bad at the time turned out to be the best thing ever happened to me. So I kind of would like to think of myself as being fairly lucky in life. But actually, to start my story is my grandfather was one of the first landowners in Jackson County, Florida, around Mariana area. And they actually, his funeral, he's buried right on his own land there. So that would be the start of my heritage on my dad's side. My mother's side were actually French and Irish. My grandmother on my mother's side was Irish, and my grandfather was French. We actually sharecropped when I was a kid, and I kind of since I've retired, I've actually, I got a grandnephew, which is my brother's grandson, bought a little piece of property that we sharecropped when I was a kid. And then I bought some property next to it, and we're in the process of clearing it up and going to put some cattle on it with him. I mean, I actually just kind of help him really, kind of a deal. So long story on that little deal, but that's kind of the start. And long about the time I was in high school, there was a gentleman came to Florida to manage a polled Hereford operation, which was a neighbor of ours. He and his family were pretty famous in the cattle business, and he got the Angus Journal and the Polled Hereford World, and I read them cover to cover, especially the herd bull issues. January, February of about 65, I got a chance to go to the last Register Merit show was in Georgia, which Herman Purdy had a show string there, and there's strings of cattle all over the United States there, and it was quite a deal for a guy that was 17 years old and just turned 17 and a wild-eyed guy, and I got to meet Herman Purdy,
it was Jack like Phillips, a celebrity to you.
Yeah, Jack Phillips, Gail Long, and got to meet them there. And Jack Phillips and Gail Long was going to start a Herdsman Institute, which was kind of a short course for what the college would give you, but without having to learn English and math and all those things. So they asked me if I wanted to come up and come ahead of the time and help them build the operation. And I did that and got on a bus. And about 5:30 in the morning, took a day and a half to get there, almost 2 days on a bus. But it was really quite an opportunity for a young guy that don't know what I'd been doing today. I hope it had been successful, but it kind of put me on the path to success in the cattle business.
Well, that Herdsman Institute, was that just getting started when you went up to it, or had it been kind of established at the time?
It had not been established. They had took and rented a 300-acre property. It's right there at Coleman Road and 7 Highway today. And I go back there. I've been back there quite a few times just to drive down through that big oak trees and things and down memory lane, as you'd say.
Yeah.
And actually the house that was a dormitory is at Missouri Town there now, not too far out from Lee Summit. If you ever have a chance to go there.
So was that, I've always been fascinated by this Herdsman Institute, and I actually heard it referenced many times of folks even saying, well, maybe we ought to do something like that again today, But how big was the class that you were a part of there?
Generally about 6 to 8 students.
So
and what they would do was it was a 6 weeks course. They would come in and then they would wind up at a state fair, the American Royal, Denver, Chicago, and all those different All-American Fraternity and those kind of things. My deal was, our first deal was to go to the All-American Fraternity. And then after I went there, I kind of went on every trip with every student because my job was to, part of these kids were young, part of them were 35, 40-year-old people, but my job was to get them up in the morning, go to breakfast, really do work before you go to breakfast about 3 in the morning, and go through the whole thing. And my deal was kind of a den mother or den father or whatever. And after I completed the course, I had a job already lined up in Kentucky. Rural Venture Farms going to hire me as a herdsman. And that was through the guy that I worked with there in Florida as the manager of Malloy Polled Hereford, a fellow named Roger Harden. Jack said, you don't need to do that. And then talked me into staying and called me a staff assistant, well, which it was, I was a den father, but different things we did, kind of let the people know what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And in other words, if we did something wrong, my job was to correct them. So the big cheese didn't have to do it. But it was quite an adventure, really, and get to know a fellow like Herman Purdy was just unbelievable. And then along the way, I had different mentors come along, and after being there a couple of years, the Vietnam draft was going on. So I went down to the draft board and I said, well, when is my number going? When am I going to come up? They said, well, within 6 months. I said, well, let's get on with it so I can get back to what I love, the cattle business. So I did that. In about 2 weeks, I was off to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and advanced training and Vietnam training, and then off to Vietnam. That was quite an adventure, to say the least.
Was that a hard switch to go from ranch life to Army life?
Really, they whip you into shape pretty quick. But I can remember kids there that come in with overweight about 100 pounds, and they go through the chow line and they'd get stuff raked off their plate into the trash can. And so I felt sorry for them. I'd get an extra piece of bread or two, and I was kind of shaped up, ready to go. And I'd kind of slip them an extra piece of bread or two. So it was quite an adventure. Vietnam I feel like taught me a lot about life, taught me about to appreciate America and the utmost. Only time I ever get emotional about it is thinking about the people that didn't come back. I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, understandable.
No.
And
Totally.
and what was your job there? What kind of tasks were you, what kind of company were you part of?
Oh, we were a combat engineer company, and our job was landmines and booby traps. And I was the demo man on that. And then actually, demo man doubles as a squad leader too. So I was a squad leader, and we were on patrol every day. That was in Vietnam, and at night we were on guard duty. Have every third night you get to sleep. So 2 hours up, 2 hours down. Quite an experience.
Well, first, thank you for your service, and we were fortunate to be able to showcase that service and the salute to service in the Angus Journal, and so thank you for that and sharing some of that story. Remind me, Paul, how long were you in the service?
I was only in about 19 and a half months, and 17 and a half of that was in Vietnam. So,
Okay.
But I got out early because I extended my time there a little bit. Yeah, that was quite an experience, but it really taught me how to read people, and I think that's one of the great assets in life. If you can read a person carrying a conversation, that's pretty important. So you learn how to read people is pretty important in life. Yeah, on to that. And I came back and spent a year and a half at the Herdsman Institute, come right back and went right back to doing what I was doing. And then from there, I got a job offer to go to Briar Hill Farms as a herdsman, and spent 7 years there as a herdsman, and about three and a half, 4 years as a manager. Had a lot of good mentors there at Briar Hill when we were there, and we felt like we were the leader of the industry when we had Columbus Y, Big John, Little John, and some of those very important bulls that's in pedigrees today. Yeah. And then got to work with a lot of different important people. I felt like Byron Good was one of our advisors, Gary Manish, and also Michigan State, Harlan Ritchie. So we had some really great people as on our staff. Well, they weren't on staff, but they were actually consultants, and they came once a year. And Mr. Haynes, really, one of them was his cousin, first cousin Byron Good was, but he really kind of turned them over to me a lot of times, and I got a lot of one-on-one conversation with those people, which I think I value to today. So different things about the industry, about the cattle business, and just life in general.
So, Paul, that would have been early 70s, correct?
Early 70s, 71 to 81, yeah.
So, right kind of during you mentioned those folks, Dr. Good and Dr. Ritchie and folks, during a type change, the Continentals were coming in. And so talk about breeding Angus cattle through that period in time, and what was being competitive. I assume you were showing quite a bit at the time?
Actually, at times we went for nine shows in a row. Leave home and come back in the fall.
Wow. So talk about what it was like to breed cattle in that time when we were shifting the type and some of the trends were changing.
The first bull I'd only been to the Institute a few months, and we took a bull called Eva's Royal Supreme in 1966 to the fraternity. And as a mature bull, he probably would have never weighed a ton. He was a junior yearling bull, and he was supreme champion that day, and things. And so I saw the cattle from not real small cattle, but fairly small, all the way to cattle that was too big. And I actually bred a lot of the cattle that was too big. But yet still, it was kind of a thing that they said if Paul Hill needed a pink one, he could probably come up with one. But but yeah, still, it's through all the type change. I think when I left North Code and went to Champion Hill, I went back to my roots from Briar Hill, and we had 700 purebred cows at Briar Hill, and we sold about 300 commercial bulls a year. So I kind of knew what a commercial man wanted. So it really, I followed the show trends and whatever it took to win, because that's the people who hired me to win. They didn't hire me to take and just breed a
participate.
that'll last a long time, So
yeah.
I'm thinking of when you talk about going a string of 9 shows in a row. How do you keep the, cattle on feed and looking good? And I mean, that seems like quite a tour you took.
Yeah, you actually would leave and go to the fraternity and go to Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Knoxville, Nashville, Memphis, those kind of shows, Birmingham, Montgomery. But yet still, you take and you didn't leave the cattle out in the sun. You brought them in before daylight, took them out after dark. And really, they actually gained and did real well on the road because they get accustomed to it. When you got ready to travel, you cut them back on half feed, and then you got them back on full feed. A lot of times you're at a show for 2 weeks, wow. 10 days or 2 weeks. The state fair lasted. You get there and you stayed 10 days, 2 weeks. Wow. And so you got to know a lot of, the breeders of all different breeds of cattle, and create a lot of friends throughout the deal. Yeah.
Sure. Probably also got to know where the laundromats were and the good places to eat and the fairgrounds and all the above.
Yeah, actually, usually the cheap place to eat. There's a place in Iowa there. You get up on the counter and you get a whole breakfast for about $1.25, and coffee, the whole bit, and drink coffee until you. Yeah, they keep filling up that coffee cup. But a lot of fun memories. So you learn. And actually, in all reality, we slept in the summertime. We slept in the barns.
Oh wow. So you did need a laundromat and a shower.
But the state fairs had showers. I mean,
right.
they had facilities there that Kentucky State Fair, even as modern as it is, of course, it's been there 50 years, but they got shower rooms in there now, but not at the extent that you'd have a dormitory that could house 100 people in some of those places for the kids to shower. So that's way back. I'm going way back in the day now.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a good place to put a pin in it while we hear from today's podcast sponsor.
My name is Nick Jorgensen. I'm the CEO of Jorgensen Land and Cattle here in Ideal, South Dakota. When it comes to getting forages put up, the most important thing for us is getting it done as efficiently as possible. And that's largely dictated by the equipment that you're using. So we've really focused on looking out in the industry and finding the best, most efficient equipment that we can find out there. If you don't have equipment that's reliable and that runs well when you get it in the field and stays running, you're going to have a hard time. Vermeer products are a big reason that we can get more done in a day.
See how Vermeer helps Angus producers do more at vermeer.com/Angus.
And now back to Paul.
So, Paul, of all of those shows you used to go to, was there one that was your favorite, the one you looked forward to the most?
Well, I guess the one I looked forward to the most was the All-American Breeders' Fraternity, and that's why I'm still involved in it today, and kind of been the chief fundraiser for many, many years. There's lots of shows today. So at one time it was the show to go to, because all the young calves out of the new bulls would show up there. And if you could take and make a dominant stand there, you really kind of set yourself up for the show season for the year. And so it was really, it was a coming out deal, but it was the most important show. And then I guess Chicago and Denver would be very important. And then in 73, it was moved down to Louisville. And so Louisville got to be a very important event also. Yeah, as times changed, different shows has had different prominence too. So, and I've seen that come and go. And today, show cattle don't correspond with breeding cattle a lot, but they do somewhat. All I can say is that those people surely know how to make them look good. A lot of people think they're a great judge of cattle, but when they get out there in the ring and start looking at them, it gets a little tougher, because their eyes get big, and I'd like, that guy thinks he's over his head. So showing cattle still is very important, I think, because what it does for young people, more people come into a breed of cattle through the show than any other way, I think. A lot of times they come up with one heifer and then they get in the cattle business. But back in the day, you had a lot of people got Angus cattle, rich people got in the Angus business because it gives them a prominence and they want to be attached to the land. And a lot of great people got in the cattle business for different reasons. Mm-hmm. But today, the family-oriented places kind of dominate the thing, I think.
From Briar Hill in Alabama, and then get me up to Champion Hill. You have a couple stops in between there?
Oh, 5 or 6 stops. Yep. More stops than I was really wanting, but you had to kind of roll with the punches a little bit. But actually, there was a guy came to Briar Hill called Nat Schaefer, and he'd rented a place in North Carolina, and really it was kind of a thing that he was looking for a manager. And Greg Kruger myself, I always told Greg I wished he'd have got the job, but maybe I wouldn't have wound up where I'm at today if he'd have got the job. But yet and still, it was a big thing, really. And in the South, our oldest daughter was in second grade, or first or second grade, and really kind of need to go into an environment that was a little better school system. My wife says we need to. Dr. Hicks is one of the greatest guys in the whole world to ever work for. Probably him and Champion Hill would probably be, those two people. I've worked for a lot of different people, worked with a lot of different people and for a lot of people, but they really were there. But yet and still, we kind of need to think about our children and those kind of things. So we thought that was a good opportunity to move to North Carolina. And then along the way, about a year after he'd been there, 6, 8 months to a year, the Northcote kind of got in a little bit of trouble with import taxes. And so then we were looking for a new deal. So we took and went, there's a guy in South Carolina named Joe Hayes, and their grandson's still in the cattle business today. Went there for about a year and a half. And then really the herd was a pretty famous herd because at the time we sold it privately for $1 million to Cobble Pond. And Bernie and Pat Shear was already there. And that guy said he had the idea if you hired 4 or 5 of the top people in the cattle business, he'd kind of control the cattle business. But he was from New York, and a lot of people use the same philosophy in the cattle business don't work in other life as it does in the cattle business. And so after about 9 months, I said, I don't know about this guy. So the North was really not for me. Certainly, I liked the people to work with, but I didn't like the owners. So I took and looking for something else. And Stan Coley was in the embryo transfer business, and I went and worked with him in the embryo transfer business for about a year. Northcote Farm was looking for a manager. They usually about a 4-year stint was good with him. So Albert Epperly was there 4 years before me, and then I was there 5 or 6 years. He was really a perfectionist in some way, but he his leadership style didn't fit with me very well either. So I had a contract with him, worked 5 years, and I finished up the contract and was looking for a new gig because he liked to intimidate people into doing good instead of leading them into doing good. So at that time I had really, Mark Duffield had worked with me at Hayes Star Ranch, and then so Mark come back and work with me there at Northcote. And at the same time, I had Frank Jackson working there too. And I think success means the people around you more so than you. If you got the right people around you, success comes. But when I left there, I went to work with Marshall Reynolds. He was looking for a guy. He had 5 different breeds of cattle, and he actually had a dream of producing one breed, about 5 different breeds in one, and have a deal. And he had quite a research project going where we weighed the cattle about once a month and then feed them all out, and then whatever cow made the most money, different genetic makeups. That went on for about a couple of years. I've worked with him on it for 2 or 3 years, and for long I'd kind of eased everything else out of the program except the Angus and a few Simmentals, and eventually ease them out too. But
Sneaky.
but it was kind of a thing. Marshall taught me more about business than probably anybody ever worked with, and he was kind of a guy that would give you a lot of opportunity, but you had to produce. So he was really, really a great individual, and really, really honored to work with a guy like Marshall Reynolds. And then Bruce and Amy Sturchball worked for me 10 years and they worked for me a little bit at Northcote, and then they moved with me to, not immediately, but moved with me to Champion Hill. And then I had one guy work with me 14 years there, and he's actually running a commercial cattle operation there with Marshall now. Also, John Davis and his family actually was born at Champion Hill, and they're still there close, within 10 miles of Champion Hill. And John worked with me about 17 or 18 years, and great friend, great family. His wife was actually served on the junior board, and actually she was actually chairman of the junior board, I think. But great set of young people, and actually I think kind of what made Lynn and my career what it is probably the young people that we work with over the years. We took and strived for them to be successful. We had quite a few of them spend summers with us there. We had one young lady that spent 10 summers with us. And she's in the photography business now, but
cool.
I could go on and on about the people that's worked with us and those kind of things, but I think that is the major thing about the success deal. And our daughter showed cattle and helped us sell cattle. I mean, really, when we went to a lot of events throughout the year, we were trying to always win and influence friends.
So I've got to ask, in that timeline, you mentioned, I think, one of those first moves, you said I had to think about Lynn and the kids, but where did Lynn enter the picture? When did you start the family? Yeah.
Well, Lynn entered the picture when I came back from Vietnam. Of course, I was taken, and I was there at the Institute, and she actually had took a job with the Polled Hereford World, setting up their first performance program. She came out to the farm one day and on a Sunday, and I showed her and a couple of our aunts around the farm, and then Dr. Phillips, I remember just like yesterday, says, he said, that lady's out of your league. I said, well, so it was kind of, I don't know. So I give her a call, and we went out on a date, and she was out of my league, but then that didn't never bother me. It was a really a great thing that happened for me. Me and my two daughters, for sure.
So she came along with you on all those moves then?
Yeah, she actually, we dated at a distance for 6 months while I went to Briar Hill, because the job was there, and she was still working for the Polled Hereford Association. And once we got engaged, she told him it'd be about she'd give him 6 months, and that's kind of the rest of it's kind of history. We've been together 53 years now, 54 coming up. So
congratulations.
Yeah, she's big. You ought to be interviewing her, because she's been a big part of the success story, because she's a realist. I'm an optimist.
Sometimes you need both. That tends to be a very nice balance.
Well, I think it kept the train from running completely off the track.
My husband and Lynn could probably swap stories then.
So, Paul, talk about the Champion Hill program a little bit more. I mean, you took, and as you said, coming into it, it sounded like Mr. Reynolds was pretty focused on a commercial focus and the multiple breeds, and then you obviously evolved it to obviously one of the most prominent registered Angus outfits. But kind of talk about what you were doing there and the kind of cattle you were striving for.
When I got to Champion Hill, Marshall always said, Paul is very patient, and he makes those little bitty steps, and before long you're in the ball game with him. So really, he really was very focused on the commercial industry. He actually owned a portion of a feedlot in Ohio. He really wanted me to buy cattle pretty regularly on the commercial cattle, but get cattle from a lot of different herds, you get disease coming in and everything. So I kind of isolated things a little bit to get away from the disease part. But and it was an evolution there. But from the very start, we started showing cattle, and he was very supportive of our kids showing cattle. And in fact, he paid our expenses for our kids to go to the cattle shows. And he said, well, we're going to gain from it because it gets us out amongst people. And he had a lot of vision about a lot of things. So we started there, and then actually I brought a few cattle because I was in a partnership with Northcote, and I brought a few cattle from Northcote there with me. And then there was actually a pretty good cow or two there that was, there was a Ming bred cow there that actually come through Reiman's was there. And there was a few Angus cattle there that he had bought that was pretty good. And then we actually put the cattle together one deal at a time. I don't remember what year the show was in Wisconsin, but we actually had reserved champion heifer that day. But I thought the best heifer in the thing was one of the division just below us, and I thought she was the future of the thing. And that wound up being the Sarah. You hear a lot about the Sarah cattle, Sarah's Dreams. That was the start of the Sarah cattle right there. Is that particular cow? And I actually had to pay a lot more than I wanted to, but I wanted her pretty bad. And the deal I made was kind of good mind would have done it at that time. It was more money than had been paid for a cow. I gave him $40,000 cash way back in the 70s. No, it's about mid 80s. And then he got a pick of every flush we got out of her for about 4 or 5 flushes. So he wound up with 5 heifer calves plus $40,000.
Wow.
And then I bought the bull called Touchstone from him, was actually a brother out of that cow. And then I bought the Sarah cow's mother. That whole Sarah family went to Champion Hill. And I kind of did that with other cows that I saw along the way, like the Georgina 419 cow. I saw her at a show. I thought she's the most feminine cow I'd ever saw. And breeding cattle, femininity is a ticket when you're breeding cattle. They're more dominant than the bulls ever. I mean, if you go follow the history of the Angus breed, it goes back to the dominant cows control it. The bulls are out of dominant cows, but the dominant cows, kind of a real feminine cow, don't need to look like a bull. They need to be really feminine. But I saw that female, I got her bought. She actually dominated our program. But then I'd had some cattle at Northcote I got from Vance Uden. And I went out to Vance's place and kind of did a deal going through the cattle. And I got to looking at all these cattle. And I said, what do you take for, we were looking at, and I looked at a lot of different cattle. And really, he kept looking at me like, what are you looking at that damn cow for? And I'm looking at this cow. And I said, well, what do you take for just a pick of this whole group? And he said, oh, heck, I don't know. I'd have to have $10,000. But he'd already sold Al one out of the same family for $135,000. So that was 3 years before then.
Uh-huh.
So he said, well, which one you going to pick? I said, I think I'll take that cow right there. And hell, I didn't think you going to pick that one. But he kept his word. He kept his word. And that cow made he and I both a lot of money. And then Tom just wrote the last history, and that was the first influential cow he's got in the book. So I don't know if you got Tom's book. It's 900 some pages. I know you hadn't read the page, but I got quite a few cows and influential cows in the breed, and Tom's books. Of course, Tom would kind of be a little favoritism to me also, so I'd have to kind of take that in effect also.
Shadow or a peg?
She was a peg, yeah.
Peg, okay.
And see, the Blackbird 33 would have been another cow. She came to a Stony Lonesome in business for 50 years. Tom called me and says, they're going to sell that herd of cattle out there. And what happened was the owner, Tom had a sale out there, and some of the vehicles drove over her azaleas. So those cattle had to leave. It was kind of an interesting story, but the manager, I went out there and I bought the whole herd. And this cow, and I was looking through those cattle, and I bought the whole herd for that one cow. But I didn't pay a whole lot for them, but I sold some $25,000, $30,000 females out of that herd in our sales along the way. So, and that herd was really a great herd of cattle, and that got added to our deal. But it's really, the whole Champion Hill program goes back to about 5 cows. And there were elite cows that kind of picked out on an individual basis. just one of those things that I think I developed the eye for that kind of cattle, and early on in life, that would reproduce. Yeah,
Did your look change over the years?
really, not really. Some of the very great females we had at Briar Hill looked the same as they did and when we sold out at Champion Hill. See, the cattle at Briar Hill was bigger than the average. They were leading in size, but they never got real big. They were 6-frame cattle. There was a lot of beautiful udders and a lot of capacity, and that's kind of where we went to real big, and then back to that kind of cattle today. So it was kind of all the way around the horn to get back to where I was at. And that when I was there at Champion Hill. What was it, 27 years? Yeah, 27 years. So it really, from the time I got there, I said, well, this is my chance. And actually, I tried to get Marshall involved in, this. I'm going to get called. I said, I want to buy this cow, whatever. And he said, well, son, if you have to have me, so you need to quit today because it's your ball game. So you either make it or don't. So I said, well, he said, don't be calling me. So I got more important things to do. So that's where it went. And he was involved, but yet still he was not a hands-on guy by no means. It was my ball game. And he didn't want, really, he would run. He would actually, you never saw him in a photo of a show or anything. He only came to one show that I remember the whole time, but he really liked to see the write-ups that he got in the Huntington newspaper.
We're going to pause for just a moment so you can hear about an exciting new Angus Journal advertising opportunity.
You have the Angus sire other cattlemen are looking for. With the Angus Bull Book 2025 Angus Sire Directory, we'll make sure those customers see your offering. In this inaugural Bull Book, you can reach new customers ready to use your genetics. This exciting advertising opportunity will be published within the October issue of the Angus Journal, putting your offering in front of an engaged seed stock audience of more than 10,000 Angus breeders. The Bull Book will also be available on Pasture to Publish, with live EPDs updated weekly. Call your regional manager to secure your ad space today. Reservation deadline is September 1st.
Now let's pick up right where we left off.
Oh, how about, so those a lot on the cows. How about on the bull side? I mean, I think of one of the bulls, when I think of you and Champion Hill, I think about Sagahatchee. So what's the story on him?
I actually own interest in quite a few different bulls along the way. We bought Touchstone, and actually Touchstone was a great bull because he put a lot of, he actually really he had a lot of body, and his mother was a great cow, probably better than the sire side of that. But Touchstone did a lot of good at Champion Hill. But really the bull that kind of made Champion Hill was Sagahatchee. I actually saw Sagahatchee, a photo of Sagahatchee on the cover of the Leachman catalog. He was a 7-frame calf, but he turned out to be a 5'2" mature bull. And he had that accelerated growth. And he actually had the bulls in the pedigree that I kind of liked. He had, goes back to Saratoga, Colossal, Saratoga, 2100, and then he was sired by EXT. And I was actually looking, I'd already was using EXT, and I was kind of looking for a bull that would be a Champion Hill bull, and I bid on him, but didn't get him. And I actually thought they were kind of fudging on me a little bit because they were coming right back to me real quick. So I quit, and then all of a sudden somebody bought him. So
Shoot.
I thought maybe they were coming back to me and I'd get him, but they didn't. But so that was the people that bought him really was trying just as hard as I was. And he went to an outfit, Alabama, and his name was BC Leachman BC EXT is what he was his name. And I changed it to Sagahatchee. And to get that bull, I took and actually Leachman on their cover of the catalog, they kind of advertised where the bull had went and all that. I couldn't even find out where the bull went. And then when I called the manager down at Sagahatchee Creek, we're not, the bull's not for sale. So I said, well, who owns the place? So this guy that was a lawyer in North Carolina, I called the guy and he says, well, come down to visit us. We'll look at the cattle. I said, well, I says, well, what about, I called him back in about an hour. I said, what about today? I got a flight to be in Atlanta in about 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever from Ohio. He met me there and I went down there and we looked through the cattle and everything. And then actually talked him into selling all his cattle, buying some cattle from me, and then let me have Salgahatchee.
Wow.
How'd you talk that? Yeah, that seems like
Yeah, actually, that's how I wound up with Salgahatchee. And I told him that, well, actually, you touched on, I said, I made this bull famous, I'll make this other bull famous. I said, this bull will make you more money with me than he will this whole herd of cattle. And he said, well, I bought the top cattle out of this sale and this sale. But I said, the problem is those sales, the top cattle wasn't very good.
So you lived up to your promise then.
It worked out really, really good. Yeah, really good. Salgahatchee is a great individual, really. And in fact, he can sire cattle today that will compete. I mean, they if you really check the pedigrees of all these cattle that go back to, in fact, a lot of the show cattle that win the Blackbird 33s, the Sarah's Dreams, and a lot of them go back to Champion Hill cattle. It'd be about 3 acts of outfits. It'd be Alan Miller's, Gary Dameron's, and Champion Hill would kind of most of the prominent cattle would be those genetics.
So when you bought Salgahatchee, he was an EXT. I mean, was he a little off the beaten path in terms of cattle that were winning in the show ring, or was he not that different bred wise at that point in time?
Well, he was really they really hadn't got to that type of cattle yet. He was in a field of 125 cows the day I saw him, and he was still in pretty good shape. And that was in late August, I think, of whatever year it was, and it was pretty dang hot. And he was chasing cows, and he still looked really good. And I actually halter broke him as a 2-year-old, and I took him to Denver. You might have been there. I took him to Denver, and Gary Dameron was judging. He was actually third in class, and the Fame bull was 4th in class, the Seidenstricker bull, and both those bulls are pretty good in pedigrees today.
Do you remind Gary of that from time to time?
Oh, after he started using him, I said, Gary, this is that bull that was too little to use when you was judging. He said, all right, go to hell.
Oh, now we're going to have Gary back on to defend himself and his
judgment.
Right.
Yeah, but Gary and I are really, we spar a lot, but we're great. I actually consider him a great friend. And I think really in all seriousness, that a lot of people should be indebted to Gary Dameron for keeping the Angus show thing alive and keeping it prominent. Yeah, Gary Dameron's a very special guy in the cattle business, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I agree. We were able to have Gary on as a guest here a little while ago. So those that maybe missed that, they can go back and listen, and you'll get you'll hear some similar philosophies between Gary and you, Paul, in terms of how to breed good cattle and the importance of the show ring and the importance of developing young people. So lots of similarities for sure. So talking about the show ring, I know you're still involved today, and you've seen changes of the show ring over time. I guess what are some of the biggest things that you're paying attention to, and I guess maybe things as you think about in the future of how we're going to use the show ring moving forward?
The show ring, really, its biggest contribution would be the youth part of it, and the junior national is evolved to the point that it's so many ways that people can come together there and learn about Angus cattle, learn about the beef industry, and all those things. So as far as the show cattle today, like I said before, you have to analyze them pretty good to be able to. These groomers are so good at it.
Yeah.
And of course, the part that I think they make them look good, the hair thing is, as far as reality, is a detriment. But yet and still, I don't know how you can change that totally, because you'd be fighting an uphill battle because the hair makes so much difference in an animal, how they look and how they're those things. But really, a lot of those cattle turn into being pretty good mother cows too. The big thing about go back to Saugahatchee, they had beautiful hair, but they were the first cattle to shed. Now the shedding thing is, I learned what cattle would shed and which wouldn't shed, and those kind of things. And really, the thing I think we call ourselves the business breed, and I think one thing that I think would be like at the Junior National, more so the Junior National to start with, is have the cow calf compete with a heifer for supreme champion. And it's just one more ribbon, but you'll create a whole new market. The market would be the fact that some of these show heifers that do make great cows, fine, but the ones, a lot of people would start looking like, go pick a guy's herd. Well, that calf's out of a great cow. Maybe it's not this way. Or a lot of cattle that really are real feminine, are not as broader based as some of the cattle that win. But the femininity part of it, as they mature, is not an issue. Once the time they're about 18 or 20 months old, it's not a big issue, because the femininity starts taking over them when they get in and start looking like a cow. And it would create a whole new market, really. I mean, like if I was big. We didn't have a cow-calf show until I was kind of big and getting that started the first time. When I was on the board, we actually about double the amount of classes at the Junior National. We used to have a senior calf from September through December 31st. You had about 2 classes and then had a championship. Now we got about 3 divisions in that. And my deal is, older cattle get, the less age makes a difference, but the younger they are, the age makes a lot of difference. Mm-hmm. And that was my pitch to get that done. And actually, a guy like Mark Gardner was on when we got that changed. And Mark said, it makes sense to me. So I actually love serving on the board with Mark Gardner. Of course, I served with like 14 different presidents. So serving on the board was quite a learning experience, to say the least.
And talk about why you decided to run for the board in the first place. We're in that kind of stage right now, but why'd you say that you wanted to serve and take the time away from the farm and ranch to do that?
Really looked up to a lot of different people that was served on the board, like Bill Conley Sr. and the guy from Mississippi, way back in the day, and John Smith, John McCurry's grandfather was on the board. He actually, him and John's mother bought a bull from me. His mother and me are about the same age, but maybe I was a little bit older. She was probably younger than me a little bit, but she was with her dad when they bought a bull from me one time at Briar Hill. So, and Harris Swayze had a good manager, and he bought a bull on the phone from me one time. And so I looked up to people that served on the board, and be honest with you, I had a dream of taking the foundation to a whole new level, and I really I schemed a little bit to get it done, but Bob Slutz and I had the same dream. So we had a long range planning deal one time, and it's kind of it was starting to lead to taking, was the show important anymore? And not knowing the answer to it, I was I'd listened to it long enough. I got heated and got up and made my speech from a standing deal, and asked the guy in charge of our finances how much money we spent on youth programs. He said 4%, and I says, "You mean that 4% of our budget goes to the future of our breed?" So I said, "Well, I think we're in trouble." I won over quite a few different board members at that deal, and that's where we hire a professional guy for the foundation, and actually had a great year that year, and we took $1 million out of the budget to fund it for 10 years, and it was quite quite a deal, really. And actually, I was served as 4 years in a row as chairman of the foundation, and so that was one of the things I wanted to get done, and I accomplished it. So, and another thing, I wanted to make the Junior National a bigger and better thing too. So it
kind of two goals went together.
And I never served on CAB, but I was always a great supporter of CAB, because I actually was a good friend of Jerry Helgren, just passed away about a month or so ago. But the first meeting for CAB was at at the picket fence
Hmm.
hill. Had a lot of great leaders at CAB, and but CAB would be like my family. We took a little trip to Eastern Europe, and this CAB didn't say it, but Angus was if you want great beef, Angus was on the menu, and even from Argentina, this is Argentina Angus, or this is American Angus from Nebraska. So if you didn't eat that, my granddaughter went to eating a hamburger there and said, "This thing is tough. This ain't fit to eat." So CAB has changed the beef industry worldwide. So and I never served on CAB, but my main focus was a lot of people said, "If you'll help me to get on CAB, I'll help you do this." So it was a little bit of trading going on. So
just reflecting on that, you saw a lot of change in the organization, but I think back and I think that vision of value campaign and of getting the foundation to where it is today, foundations don't just take hold overnight, but you look at what the foundation's able to support today in terms of our youth and education and research pillars. And so it's that, but it took somebody with a passion and a vision for what could be to make those things happen, and appreciate you doing that.
I really, to be honest with you, I never envisioned it to be what it. Milford Jenkins said it could be this way, but I said, I just wanted it to be better than what it was. So, working with young people, that was one of the things that I thought that was probably the most important thing. And of course, I knew CAB was often going. The first guy that had CAB almost failed. I remember. And actually, I talked. There was 15 board members and two officers, president, vice president, and I personally knew all 15 of them, and not one of them said they voted against it, but it was eight of them did one time. So, yes. But it was a legitimate argument. They hadn't took root yet, but good thing we had Mick Colvin that he was dogmatic, and he had his nose to the grindstone, and and of course we've had a lot of great people since then, but he made it happen. So really, as you go back in history, success and failure has one step away, and that's the way I look at a lot of things in life. Is success and failure is just a slim cut.
Yep.
Your support of the youth, even if you didn't envision it being what it could be today. I mean, we saw that, Mark, here at Junior Show last month, I guess, when they're handing out scholarships and all the things that the foundation supports and all the good kids that are running around there.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and the educational programs y'all have when you get, all through different stages, even this young leadership there, you get them all together and they swap ideas, and there's no second for it. There's absolutely no second for just face-to-face, swapping ideas. When you go, those young people or those middle-aged people, a lot of them are middle-aged people, and they get home, they got a whole new set of ideas to push them forward. It's no second for it as far as I'm concerned, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we have enjoyed having you on and hearing your stories. We always end on a random question of the week. So before I do that, is there anything else that you wanted to be sure that we covered or asked you about?
I would like to say a little bit about the people that I've worked with over the years, starting back with the gentleman that came from Kentucky to Miranda, Florida, Roger Harden, Jack Phillips, Gail Long, and then all the consultants we had at Briar Hill, Kenny Haynes there, and then from Kenny Haynes, Pat and Bernie Shear was friends that they were actually Institute kids, and still great friends today. And without friendship like that, and then the people that work for me, work with me would be guys like Mark Duffell, Bruce and Amy Sturtzbaugh, John Davis, there that worked with me over the years. It really was. They're probably the people was probably more important than the cattle along the way. But the cattle that I put together over the years was, was really, when I saw it, I had a gut feeling about it. And actually, a guy like John Davis, I'd seen him 2 or 3 years before. Him and his sister would bring 1 or 2 calves that they couldn't afford to buy a calf, but they was always competitive because they did a better job than anybody else. And so to say that about somebody is, and see their kids grow up today, and like we patterned the Atlantic National Scholarship Program kind of behind the deal that we give about 10 scholarships there a year. And I've been the fundraiser for that for 30, I think it'll be the 39th year this year, maybe the 40th. I don't know, but it's been a pleasure to do those things and to be blessed with the people that I've had the chance to work with. Is kind of, wanted to get that said before we finished up the deal. Yeah.
Good. That sounds kind of like a who's who list you've got going on there. So I'm sure that they would say the same thing about you. So the random question of the week is, I want to know, out of, you're very competitive in the show ring, if you have a particular one that stands out as a favorite memory or a favorite win in the show ring.
Oh.
Is that like asking you to pick a favorite kid?
Yeah. Actually, very much so. Well, we've had, let's see, the favorite deal. We've had a lot of good, wonderful days. Mm-hmm. I guess when we won Denver with a female called 3842, she was champion at the Junior National that year, and she went back in Denver and was champion at the same place, different show. I guess that was pretty exciting day. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us and share all of your wealth of experience in the business. And obviously, thank you for your service back. And you've continued to be a big champion of the foundation too. So I'm sure Jacqueline would scold me if I didn't also thank you for your continued support of the junior program.
Yeah, it's really, y'all got a great staff there. Actually, I know quite a few of the people that work there, and kind of, unfortunately, I've known them since some of them when they were in the strollers. So when people are successful, it really warms your heart. So yeah, very much so.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. I know this will be a lot of fun for our listeners to hear some of. I'll be honest, Paul. I thought I knew you pretty well, and I've learned quite a few different things here today. So I know you've got such a rich and deep heritage in the breed and programs and your breeding philosophies and cattle you've touched. And so thank you for coming and sharing. And I know this will be a lot of fun for our listeners.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And you're taking your lunch. You must be on a diet, so take your lunch hour to visit with me. And I don't take that lightly either. I've seen a lot of people come and go at the association office, and a lot of great people, a lot of great service that along the way. And I would remember they had a pre-meeting at the Herdsman Institute, and I was upstairs, and they were talking about Lord Miller's going to be the next executive secretary. So actually, I eavesdropped a little bit there a little bit. I was in the bathroom, but I overheard. I said, "Oh man, it looked like," and it did happen the next day. And I'm quite sure I never knew the other gentleman. I'm quite sure he contributed greatly, and we've had a lot of great leaders, and it's a great position, and it does deserve it has to have a lot of great leadership to get there and do the job that y'all are doing. And we've been fortunate to have the best people in the industry, beef cattle industry head the job. So you're doing a great job, and I really appreciate you every day.
We better cut you off, or Mark's going to be blushing here.
Well, I do appreciate that. It's a privilege to sit in this role and think about the great leaders and team members that we've have today and have had in the past of this organization, and that serve in the way they do and put us in the position that we are. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
And just like that, we're back for another season. As we mentioned in the beginning, we do really enjoy getting your feedback. So always feel free to go to theangusconversation.com, where you can find the latest episodes, or scroll to the bottom and suggest a topic or a guest for the podcast, or learn how to reach our listeners through your support in advertising. We're really looking forward to a lot of great discussions this fall. Thank you for joining us for The Angus Conversation, an Angus Journal podcast.